right, so I would like to start by giving an idea of what the European integration of research infrastructures looks like, on paper at least. And you can see it here from this scheme that I got from the ESFRI roadmap, that you get at the base, you have the national facilities that can get some support through Horizon 2020 to these integrating activities to start integrating and eventually become pan-European infrastructures. That's the ESFRI domain when they're organized under a single entity and coordinated at European level. Of course, this is not something that is created out of nothing. We have examples here on these integrating activities, and namely these two domains that we've been focusing on. We have Marinet, which is on ocean energy, and also AquaXL 2020, which is a project on research infrastructures for aquaculture. Eventually, we'll have something on marine energy in ESFRI, maybe in 2020. We have a project ongoing, and there's likely going to be an application for 2020, even though it's going to be a very competitive call at that time. So briefly, the ESFRI is basically a group that is composed of representatives of member states, associated countries, and the European Commission. And it's got a mandate to support policy on research infrastructures and on integration of funding and on strategy planning. So it produces reports, position papers, recommendations, but the most visible part of its work is the ESFRI roadmap. The first one of them was produced in 2016. It's updated with some intervals. It was updated in 2008, 10, and 16, which is the current version. On the 16 update, there was a rule that was introduced that any project can only stay for 10 years in this roadmap, and after those 10 years, it has to be either classified as a landmark or it has to be kicked out. So due to this rule, now we have to have, every 10 years after one update, we have to have another update. So we have one for next year. The evaluation is ongoing. And we'll have another one for 2020, and that's going to be the one where Marinergi is going to be applying. Also, ESFRI does some, on these roadmaps, you can see some landscape analysis of the main areas of research in Europe, and they identify some gaps of where we need some more infrastructure in certain domains. If you look at the roadmap itself, at the document, this is what, you don't have to read this, of course you can't even. But this is what it looks like. On the left-hand side, you have the projects, so the less mature infrastructures, and on the right side, you have the landmarks. There's nothing here related to energy, ocean energy, or to aquaculture directly. You can also look here on this display. It's divided by the different research fields: energy, environment, health and food, physics, and astronomy, social sciences, digital infrastructures, and you have the several projects there. Once Marinergi is in the roadmap, I don't know if I can point it here, it's going to be here on the yellow column, on energy. If we have something on aquaculture, it will fall under the orange column of health and food. But the more important thing to focus on for this community now is to look at the gap analysis and the landscape analysis on ESFRI. And it's clearly identified on the energy landscape and gap analysis one project that is important for offshore wind, at least, which is Wind Scanner. And this has been mentioned in the first session, the LiDAR that is now being used for testing the deployment of, to see how the wind interacts with the blades and all that. So this is one area, but it's very specific. And of course, then on the test facilities for different types of ocean energy, Marinet is the project that is the reference at European level. Also, on the health and food gap analysis, you have on the under livestock facilities, which is what aquaculture is. It's livestock, even though people may not think about it in that term. AquaXL is the reference research infrastructures project that is mentioned in the gap analysis. So it's expected that at some point, this might evolve into ESFRI infrastructures in Europe. So right now we have In FP7, we had these integrating activities for both domains. Then in Horizon 2020, we also had continuation of these projects, and eventually we'll get some ESFRI projects getting out of this. So this was the first focus of this presentation. I would now like to focus just briefly on something that is very, very timely now. It's being discussed, and it's very, I think, pertinent for what's going to happen with the ESFRI roadmap and the application of Marinergi, which is the long-term sustainability of research infrastructures. It's topic of the day in Europe. There's been several reports that have been produced with recommendations for the research infrastructures. One of them is here. The cover of it is from ESFRI, and it has 7 main recommendations. One of them, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. One of them is that, sorry, 4
minutes.
Okay, can do it. Okay, first one is that they should focus on excellence of the research being done there, and that's obvious. Then there's a focus on human resources, on the integration of different research infrastructures, and very importantly, of the digital component of it. Then the exploitation of the research infrastructures as innovation hubs, so the interaction with industry, which in the cases considered here today is very obvious, and I guess there's very few people that I have seen today that are not from private sector here. And an extension of that is that they have to demonstrate what's the socio-economic impact of their activities. Then lastly, they have to have effective governance, long-term funding, and effective management. This is something that has to be addressed through the ESFRI project process. And then also there should be a coordination with the national level of the facilities. So that was ESFRI. There's a similar report from the European Commission. The recommendations are more or less the same, and it's been published at around the same time. So of 3 of the topics I'd like to mention briefly is this one of the exploitation of the potential of research infrastructures as innovation hubs. And industry can have here 3 main roles. One of them is as a user of the research infrastructure, another one as a supplier of parts, like building of the research infrastructure itself, and then as a co-developer of technology together with the more academic part of it. Industry has been a user in these projects that I've talked about. I have only data from the FP7 projects, and you can see that in Marinet, under the FP7 project, which has to provide access for researchers from the private or the public sector, they granted access. Most of the access was actually for the private sector. AquaExcel not so much. Maybe it has to do with the value chain and the types of research that is done in each of them. But it's a very important thing for sustainability, and this can be illustrated further if you look at the R&D survey for Portugal, and you see that this was in the news that last year we had an increase in the investment in science and research, and this was just due to the private investment, not the public investment in science.
You have 2 minutes to conclude.
2 minutes? Okay. Sorry, I'm missing one thing. I think this wasn't the right presentation, but it doesn't matter. Okay, I was just missing one part there, but it doesn't matter. I can talk about it later. So the other recommendation is the harmonization and integration of the operation with the digital infrastructures. And this is also, it's one of the, let's say, the darlings of the commissioner. It's the European Open Science Cloud. It has to create an one-point access, and it has to create ways for the data to be preserved and interoperable between different domains. There is, here in the bottom, you see a topic on the current work program that is going to support the integration of ESFRI and other world-class research infrastructures into the European Open Science Cloud. There is going to be one project awarded for the energy domain. I would expect to see Marinergi integrated in this project, and if you want to talk to me afterwards, we can do that. But apart from the European Open Science Cloud, another thing that we have to look at currently is the high-performance computing, and here I have one example of This is from the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, and you can see here is the prediction of wind patterns for 3 months and the installed capacity for wind power generation. So you can see that this is very important to have in account, not only for deployment, but also for grid management and all that. And this is something that is becoming more and more important, also due to national investments as well. Because I'm coming here to the last topic, which is coordination of the national and European levels. In the bottom here, I have the digital infrastructures for advanced computing. And we have in the roadmap 2 infrastructures for advanced computing. We also have a supercomputer being installed in Minho right now. And this is an investment from the Portuguese government at this point. Also, we have the national roadmap. We don't have AquaXL PT or Marinergi PT in the national roadmap. Maybe if there's an update, we can get that. Okay, that's all.
Right on time. Thank you very much.
We have my contact here. Cristiano Leandro is also the ESFRI delegate, the main ESFRI delegate actually, and Daniel Carapau deals with the national roadmap.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Marta Silva. I'm from WavEC and I'll be presenting Marinergi. We already heard a little bit about it just now. So the first part is, what is Marinergi? And it's a Horizon 2020 InfraDev project. It started this year and it will be going till June of 2019. The main objective is to prepare a bid for the ESFRI roadmap. And in this project we have 14 partners and 12 countries represented at this point. And we have already added a partner since the beginning, so we are looking to expanding the project to involve as many member states as possible. The mission and the vision for Marinergi, the mission is to unite the different testing infrastructures that exist in Europe and integrate and create an integrated center to deliver offshore renewable energy. And we can see this happening threefold. We see the implementation and development of best practices, standardization and quality metrics to improve the technology side, the risking it and increasing investor confidence in technology. We also see leveraging the existing supply chain and capabilities at each node to improve and to accelerate the development, and also not just for renewable energy, but also for the local supply chain, and also to inform at national and European level in terms of policy and investment strategies, so that the leadership that Europe now has on offshore energy can continue to be in leadership. Within the context of the ESFRI, because this is preparing for an ESFRI roadmap, we see what ESFRI is from the previous presentation. Marinergi, the project, the Horizon 2020 project, is the first step to forming an independent legal entity to manage the then ESFRI project. So the project itself will deliver the key components for the ESFRI bid, for the roadmap. It will provide a company template and a business plan, and as well secure each member state's commitments to the actual project. But the idea of Marinergi didn't start from nothing. So we build upon past success. We build upon the Marinet project, which created this network of research infrastructures that aim to accelerate the development and the deployment of offshore renewables. And it ran from 2011 to 2015, 29 partners, 12 countries, 45 facilities. It's over 300 applications, 178 granted projects. Industry engagement was quite high. And more than that, it created a brand. Marinet was recognized as a brand for testing and for developing standard ways of testing wave and tidal and cross-cutting ocean devices and technologies. Starting this year with Marinergi, the second phase of Marinet started, the Marinet 2. We now have 10 more partners. We have one more country. We have 57 testing facilities. And we opened not only to ocean, but also to offshore wind as well, and cross-cutting technologies. So we can see a timeline happening from Marinet to Marinet 2 with the Marinergi happening to continuing into Marinergi, the ESFRI roadmap project. So we can see we have an opportunity here to have Marinergi as a leading project or company in the European offshore renewable energy development. Europe is already recognized as a leader. The institutions that are part of Marinet 2 and that are part of Marinergi are also recognized as leading on offshore renewables through testing, through certified results. Marinergi has already support not only from the ESFRI review panels, but from the European Commission. And there's already a securement of the additional funding once we enter the roadmap. Furthermore, there's, this is a way to deliver on commitments that have been made in terms of offshore wind and ocean energy that is very focused. So we can have our policies to develop technologies and to fill into the blanks that we see in testing infrastructures and needs and future needs. We can do it in a focused way with an European vision and not just at each national level. And the other joint activities, such as Marinet 2, will support developers and feed other projects into the facilities. So our vision is for a pan-European distributed research infrastructure with a shared central coordination, headquarters at this point located in Ireland, as University College Cork is leading the project. It will operate as a company, and it will have smart centralization as part of its corporate culture. The core company will function, the core company functions will operate not only on the headquarters, but on each node. And all infrastructure that will be part of Marinergi will see an increase of research, of business, and of investment. And each country node can be comprised of one single infrastructure or our own distributed infrastructure, Marinergi point PT, as José said. And this is some of the functions that we see that can be distributed across nodes. Legal, the infrastructure, the user access, quality control, technical aspects, the marketing, the business development. And we already have a lot of countries that comprise of Marinergi and that have a coastline. Some of them have a very small coastline and still want to be part of the project, because this will be a leading project. But there are other things that this is the project, but what will it bring? So the value add to stakeholders, we identified 4 key stakeholders: the industry, the member countries, the commission, and the research facilities themselves. So starting with the research facilities that will be part of the Marinergi, the joint activities and more funding opportunities will lead to a more sustainable revenue stream for them. Cross-training and standardization practices will lead to skilled workforce. And more volume of activity and more capacity will lead to cost efficiencies in the facilities themselves. With the industry, this integrated knowledge center that will have a skilled workforce and more efficiency gains will be added value to the industry to use these facilities. And there will be more investor confidence and less risk from having a standardized test for your technology that can be replicated across other institutions and that you know exactly what went into it. And it will also allow you to the industry to fast track through TRLs. So Marinergi will offer from TRL 1 to TRL 8, 9, so that there will always be a choice for you to see there's an institution that can provide this kind of testing. For member countries, we'll okay, so you can read next to conclude, but member countries will have a better management of funding and of contributing to targets, and the European Commission will have higher efficiency on projects. So the next steps for each national node is direct engagement with key stakeholders, organizing the national nodes and the profiling the infrastructures, and get some letters of intent from governments for the 2020 application. The 2 points will be discussed on today's closed session in the afternoon. If someone wants to attend, thinks that they can bring something valuable to the table, come talk to me, and I can get you a seat. Thank you.
Going faster forward.
Kymaner is a company that builds air turbines for oscillating water column. It builds on designs made by IST. So from the start, the collaboration is very, very narrow. It's almost a single body. Oscillating water column is to some extent quite a popular concept amongst wave energy systems or concepts. And Kymaner to some extent has developed almost is a natural choice when it comes to delivering a power takeoff unit for one of those systems. But standing out as an option is not enough, and we have to have products that we can demonstrate are reliable. One of the things that any investor or any wave energy system developer asks is typically in which TRL does your products fall into? And well, we usually answer back, I mean, okay, TRL is a very broad concept, although it should be quite simple and structural. It isn't, because there are many TRLs. There is one TRL from the US Department of Defense. There is another one from NASA, which is where it all started from. There is another from the European Space Agency. Now there is a very simplified one from the EU, which helps. And finally, there's also one from oil and gas, apart from a list of 70 plus others, TRLs. But what the investor, what the system developer really wants to know is, have you tested your systems? How mature are they? And this is where infrastructures come into place. And they come into place because the first thing that we absolutely need to know is when we develop a new product, we need to build ourselves confidence in that product. It's not a given that a new product is a good idea. It seems like a good idea, but we need to be comfortable that it is before showing it to anyone and before starting any type of promotion of that concept. Because we need, ultimately, we need to generate trust of the system developers. And for that, we need to show evidence of the performance and the reliability.
But what would we need really here in Portugal?
An infrastructure that...
It's the pilot zone, it's tanks. What do you think is missing?
Yeah. Because we build turbines, we are a bit on the side of that, need. The first thing we need is a laboratory where we can test the turbines after they have been manufactured. Because one thing is to build models and to design a geometry, define the aerodynamics, and the other thing is to actually be able to test, complete, ready to test, ready to send out to sea turbines. And this now, it is possible because IST, to some extent, IST has developed a new laboratory facility that can test ready to operate turbines. We have had a very good example in the Opera H2020 project, which actually follows a very stepwise approach in that regard. We dry tested it in IST. We dry tested a new turbine concept in IST.
But my point, therefore, you have everything you need?
We have in Portugal now, because the next test, we are doing it in the Motrico power plant in the Basque Country.
Yeah.
And the final test will be done offshore, and we do not have an operating pilot zone here. So we will do it again.
We'll come back on the subject. Nuno, you are at the other end of the spectrum, building the real things. What do you think you can take from all these actions and all these collabs, these things moving on? You have made recently a very huge investment into Aveiro, dedicated to the offshore. How do you see these things progressing faster?
Well, we do see it very positively, because what ASM and the industrial issue in Portugal needs is in fact reliable and executable projects. We have, as you mentioned, invested over the last year in Severo do Voga to increase the fabrication capacity. We have invested also in Aveiro facility over 30 million euros, and as well we have invested circa 4 million euros in the shipyard cooperation with the shipyard at Lisnave in order to create the capacity for fabrication. So what, from the industrial perspective, we see missing, it's projects that comes into execution.
But would you see yourselves positioning also a bit upstream and also contributing for the design of these projects that later you manufacture?
Of course, we have done this. Actually, Demography, that unfortunately was a dead project, just in the end, we have fabricated even the parts. So we do see ourselves, as we did in the technology investment in the floating technology. So ASM is totally,
and you'd be prepared to be part of these collabs and work with the other. Okay.
We are in close cooperation with WavEC. We are even members, active members, and we are very active in promoting such opportunities.
Okay. Miguel, what about yourself? What exactly, could you briefly explain what you do and what you could take from this, and what would be your position on these initiatives?
When I started working on developing technology related to wave energy, it was around 15 years ago, and the landscape was totally different from nowadays.
Could you pick the mic, please?
And the landscape 15 years ago here in Portugal, at least I believe also in the worldwide, it was also difficult to find places where you could test your devices, to find finance. I remember the nightmare of the licensing process of trying to put your device into the sea. Like Luisa was explaining before, I think it's a very important issue, the legal aspect, to make it easy when you approach a public entity, that they didn't look at you like somebody strange. They don't understand what you're talking about, what kind of strange machine are you trying to put inside of the water. But that there is a kind of a protocol that is normal. Anybody that has a new idea can go there and ask for permission, and it should be a normal process, not a strange.
Therefore, you put a lot of emphasis on the licensing process.
I think that's a very important issue.
The licensing could have a lot to do with the pilot zone, where things could be almost a bit pre-licensed.
It's important that the engineer or the investor should not spend many hours trying to wait for a permit or environmental impact survey. The other issue that I think is also important is that, especially for small developers, that they should have a low-cost way of trying to put their feet in the water and try to test the devices. at the moment in Europe, you see a lot of pilot zones or test centers, but they are mostly meant for already more or less developed technologies at a certain scale. I think it would be important to have also locations where you could test at sea very small scale models and have the facilities to locally, if you need to repair something, that you could easily do it locally. So it's not only about the testing, but also then the support infrastructures to make some repairs, some new construction.
Okay, that brings Ren into the picture. Ren, I think you have the ones with the permit to build a pilot zone in the country. Could you briefly explain where we are there?
Okay, thank you, António, for your question, and thank you for WavEC, António, for inviting us to explain or to say a few words about the pilot zone, Portuguese pilot zone. As you know, the pilot zone was created some years ago, in year 2008, almost 10 years ago, and the main objective is really to facilitate the licensing. That is to say, the concept is to create one guichet in order to facilitate the licensing to test new devices for maritime energy, for wave energy, and so on. But what is really lacking is the infrastructure, that is to say, the interconnection between somewhere in the sea and the electrical grid onshore. So until now, the government or the energy agency is thinking about or to move this pilot zone located in the central part of Portugal, in the Atlantic Ocean, to move to the northern side where is the wind float project. But until now, we know, for instance, Ren doesn't know what is the decision, is to change the area of pilot zone or to extend the pilot zone, that is to say, to create at least two zones. We have no news about this.
It will be done for sure, and to be a bit, many of those things have appeared in the country a bit spontaneously and through entrepreneurs.
Yes,
I always point out the case of Aguçadora, where was long ago an entrepreneur with AWS built the cable, and we have been building systems on it as if it was a pilot zone. And I myself see it going on as a start of the pilot zone. But it's a priority to be able to do that.
Yes,
Because basically, as I see it today, there is a protocol between Portugal and Holland for SINs, for having that small scale type of testing. Then Aguçadora could play a role in waves, as it was originally designed. And Vienna would be a very good pre-commercial zone where you have a cable of 200 megawatts or so, would cover the full spectrum. I think it was urgent to put some, I think the government understands this with the laws which came out recently.
You are right, because the pilot zone is a concession from the state. And I guess there are some legal problems in order to create or to expand legal problems. I'm an engineer, so I know nothing about this kind of restrictions, legal restrictions about to extend these kind of concessions. That's why probably they are studying some obstacles this way.
With this, I would pass the word to Pedro Valverde. Pedro, you have been working a lot on offshore since doing float and before. And I understand that one of your priorities today is big data and analytics. Should all these collaborative projects take also on this subject and on the subject of open data on which you are working to move forward, Europe to move forward in this area? We are always speaking big data and analytics, but basically what the infrastructure here is the availability of data. What is your vision? I believe that in the past you had a project or working on a project that was Wind Maven, I believe. Can you make a couple of comments in this area? Because I think a lot of the things that should be critical to share is information and data.
for the ones that are involved in this industry, we understand that it's very demanding to develop offshore technologies and develop offshore industry. It requires significant investment. It requires infrastructure to be available. It requires skills, and this is not possible without having a strong collaboration. Typically, what we see is companies, and we have been one of those that try to protect as much the data that we create. Also for IP reasons. But we have seen also, for example, the project Final 1 in Germany and Final 2, they have put some data available to the research industry. And I believe that that's very important because most of the times the industries are working without real data. And as I said, developing an industry like this, it requires, there is a huge, long roadmap. It requires several tries. It requires the participation of several parties. So having a strong collaboration between the parties, having open data available to the ones that need to work with the data or are just curious about the data, I think is very relevant.
Okay.
So that should be one of the steps that we should work in parallel with this industry, so that we can, I'll say, merge our efforts and be more efficient in trying to achieve our targets.